Welcome to ESVN, the Emma Sports Vigeland Network show. My name is Emma Vigeland. Please, 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 we are so close to 10,000 subscribers. Hit the subscribe button. YouTube.com/ESVN show. Put on push notifications. All of that good stuff. Rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. You know the drill. Hello, Bradley Alsop, co-host, producer, all that good stuff.
Good afternoon.
Yes, sorry we're a little late today, guys. We had the AC repair person come in. They told us there was nothing wrong with the AC. We said there definitely was because it didn't work for a week, even though it's working today, almost as if we knew. The AC knew you were coming.
The gaslighting is crazy.
It's really, it's totally toxic, to be honest with you, by that air conditioning unit. They do not have a healthy relationship with us.
The AC said it was like literally like, you sound crazy right now.
I mean, yeah, that's not what I said.
I was working all of last week. You literally told me that.
Bradley, there's something weird going on. Look, my elbow is in your little area here. Well, we'll fix that.
Oh, okay.
But
interesting.
I just was like, optical illusion for a second. We're back. Hello, guys. Happy to be talking to you and happy to honestly have had a sporting event over the weekend that I was actually invested in, and not in a gambling way, just emotionally invested. Not sure if you guys were able to watch the Wimbledon final, the men's Wimbledon final, but this was an incredibly significant passing of the torch moment in a sport that has, for the men's game, been essentially dominated by 3 guys for decades. Federer, Nadal, Djokovic. 3 titans of the game. I think a lot of people would argue that because I think Djokovic holds the majors record, he is the greatest of all time. Everyone has their personal favorites. I grew up being a Federer fan. But the fact that the 3 of those guys were so dominant for so long, and they're now transitioning to a 20-year-old who defeated Djokovic and his anti-vaxxer self, gotta be honest, I was rooting against him for that reason, even though he's always classy.
So does
in
most
the
of the
aftermath.
tennis-watching public.
Totally, but
the Wimbledon crowd was in it for him yesterday, but usually they don't.
There were some Djokovic stands in the crowd for sure.
Heard some Novak chants, definitely.
Yeah, but like, just to put this into perspective, there have only been 4 Wimbledon winners in Carlos Alcaraz's entire lifetime. He's 20 years old. I'm going to run through this, okay? He was born in 2003. That was the first year Federer won Wimbledon. Federer won in 03, in 04, 05, 06, 07. 5 straight. Then Nadal finally beats Federer in the finals in 2008. Federer wins it again in 09. Nadal again in 2010. I mean, this was just like people talk about the Djokovic Federer rivalry. I always found Nadal Federer to be the most compelling. Djokovic first wins it in 2011, Federer again in 2012. Andy Murray beat Djokovic in 2013 in 3 straight, which I don't know how that happened. He did win it again.
The power of being British.
Yeah, I know. It was like so... I mean,
it was fan service.
Talk about crowds being invested. Although it's like seeing Serena at the US Open, for example. Exactly. And even back in the day, what's the name of that tennis player? That was I'm forgetting exactly.
Man or woman?
Man. The
Pete Sampras?
No, not the Sampras Agassi era. Yeah. I'm totally blanking on his name. But he had a really fast first serve. Gosh, what is wrong with me?
Bjorn Borg?
No, you're going way too far back. Andy Murray beat Djokovic in 2013. Djokovic won in 2014, 2015. Murray again in 2016. Federer again 2017. Djokovic then for 4 straight tournaments. They skipped 2020 due to COVID. And then now Alcaraz. So that's his entire lifetime. Only 4 guys won Wimbledon. And what really stuck out to me in watching Alcaraz's play was that he just has this incredible quickness, this athleticism, and this touch that you don't expect his all-around game to be so solid because he doesn't seem like he has the strength, although that can happen as he gets a little bit older. But what really impressed me was his drop game and the fact that he's able to sell that so subtly. He has this like mental acuity and flair to his game, which is quite unique, I would say, at least. And so the fact that we're moving past the big three, right, plus Murray as being the outlier in that era, and into this new era of tennis, where hopefully we can see the kind of level of dominance and high quality of play that we did in that period of time. It's just an exciting time because people didn't even think Djokovic would have this much of a lasting impact and lasting reign within the sport, and he's just maintained it even at the age of 36. So, your thoughts, Bradley?
Yeah, it was kind of surprising because in their most recent matchup, there was a little bit, I think, of a similar form. I don't remember the exact particulars, and whether it was the French or the Australian of this year, where Djokovic beat Alcaraz, and Djokovic sort of did a lot of what he does usually with. It was
the French Open when Djokovic beat Alcaraz in the semis,
right? And then in what Djokovic usually does with younger players, which is almost like. It sometimes seems like he almost like takes a set off and then like to like sort of study what his opponent does well. Like he'll just like lose like 6-1 or 6-2 and then literally like come back and win 3 sets in a row. And so I thought maybe that was similarly happening after Alcaraz won the 6-1 in the third set. But I got to give a lot of credit to Alcaraz for how young he is, given how young he is, how poised he is, how kind of unflappable he is in terms of how his confidence and his unwillingness to get kind of flustered or broken emotionally or mentally by a guy like Djokovic who can really do that. And he was honestly actually doing it to Djokovic himself, which is what I thought was so impressive, was like his changeup basically, instead of like trying to, sort of like dazzle Djokovic with his speed after like one of his traditional kind of like decimating forehands that he has, like some of the craziest angles, craziest amounts of strength, I speed I've seen on a ball, and it isn't like a backhand or like a slice or something. He would do drop shots. There was that one that he hit over Djokovic's head after like a really spirited rally where it was like. Even some players who are, maybe
I saw that play too.
Yeah,
the
like
touch
decades
to get that right near the baseline and
so
over.
He couldn't even. Djokovic couldn't even respond.
Yes.
Like players twice his age don't feel the confidence or feel like they have the touch to make that work, and he was doing that in the 5th set of the final of Wimbledon at 20 years old. Like he's a very, very special player, and we're seeing. I think potentially the dawn of a new era or like a changing of the guard, so to speak, where it's not just that, it'll be a huge shock or a huge notch in Carlos Alcaraz's belt to beat Novak Djokovic. Now we're basically, I think, now going to have to operate under like he is going to be a contender in any tournament that he plays.
Yeah.
And he's going to be one of the top, like...
Well, he's the top player. He's the top ranked player, and I feel like he's going to hold on to that for a while.
Right.
And I mean, and the fact that he has that kind of touch on such a fast surface like grass is especially impressive. The mental toughness that you describe. I mean, he got smoked in the first set.
Yeah.
And then he came back to win the second set and the third set.
8-6 in a tiebreak too. So it was also like it was like a hard fought.
Yeah. And then right. And then he was fairly dominant in the third set, but Djokovic is a professional, and he fought back in the fourth, and then in the fifth it just took that early break, and he was able to just maintain and have again the mental toughness in the most prestigious tournament in the world. I love me some US Open, and the French Open has its own I think the beauty of that being the only clay surface is unique,
but Wimbledon
is. I mean, and they
iconic.
know it. They know it.
Yeah.
They treat it themselves with the commensurate pretentiousness
in the collared shirts, and
Kate Middleton coming out, I'm sorry, the Princess of whatever she's the princess of.
Of Wales.
Look, I love her outfits. That's the one thing I care. That's the one thing I'll give her credit for as a royal. But yeah, just really incredible tennis, and the fact that it went to 5 sets was a welcome surprise in a period where there's not a ton of sports content. Or I should not say content, not a ton of sports that I'm that invested in. I'm struggling with baseball because the Mets are so terrible. But it was a great weekend for that as well.
Yeah, and it's just awesome to think someone mentioned this on Twitter. Well, 2 things to your point. Alcaraz like struggled on grass even as early as like earlier this year. Like he had a match where he almost lost to a guy like ranked in the 80s on grass just because he was not as familiar as like kind of expert in the surface. And to come back and win like, 5 or 6 straight or whatever it takes to get to the final and then win the final, I think it also shows that not only is he at this level now, his floor is so high, but his ability to learn, like that learning curve not being nearly as steep from what other, lesser tennis players might need to like adapt to that surface. And now he wins Wimbledon against arguably, like it can be debated, the best men's tennis player ever.
Yes.
Like it's a really amazing feat. And it also, I think, is a real sign of great things to come for him. On the women's side, it was a little bit less entertaining.
Although she was the first
which is amazing,
unranked player to win Wimbledon.
Yeah, Marketa Vondrousova, from the Czech Republic, defeated Ons Jabeur of Tunisia, one of my favorite players to watch. She's just a very unorthodox tennis player. It was an interesting or
unseeded, maybe not unranked.
Unseeded, yeah, it was an interesting
unranked would be insane.
Yeah, okay, like almost like an amateur. Yeah,
yes, that can't happen.
But it was wild, and the bracket kind of broke out in an interesting way because Iga Swiatek, the the very clear number 1 player in the world, was defeated by Ukrainian Elena Svitolina, and then leading to this final between Vondrousova and Jabeur. So all it is to say is it was a great tournament, great finals, and I'm very much looking forward to the U.S. Open in a few weeks.
Wait, okay, I need to correct myself. Vondrousova was 42.
She's ranked 42. But
Jabeur was the first unseeded woman in the Open era to win in the all right, this is a terribly written article. God, terrible podcasting by me. I'm sorry. Keep going. Okay, Let's start over. Forget this.
But then the only other I was going to say is someone mentioned that or someone said this on Twitter that it almost reminded them of the moment, one of the first times that Federer defeated Pete Sampras in a final, as kind of like the changing of the guard, the sort of generational shift. And of course, I don't think this means at all that Djokovic is done or Djokovic is finished competing. Yes. But I just think it is a sign that Alcaraz is someone to be reckoned with, is not just like a younger pest to like the best of the best. Like he is actually up there.
The correction is that Vondrousova was ranked 42nd in the world, and Jabeur was the 6th seed. Okay. So that is that's the ranking. But I didn't even realize that Serena Williams in 2018 was ranked as low as 118 because she was battling all of those health issues, she went on to win to reach the final in that time. But very cool, at least. Yeah. It was just not as exciting. It was 6-4, 6-4 straight sets.
Once she got rolling, Vondrousova, she just sort of started dominating people. She beat Svitolina also, who beat the number 1 Swiatek in straight sets as well. So she just I think it's sometimes fascinating when players like that can just get hot and even if they were very much unranked or unseeded and unheralded before, just go on a run and win the biggest tournament in tennis.
Yeah, the women's game is very wide open right now.
Totally.
But we also should touch on this here.
Were you thinking of Andy Roddick?
I was thinking of Andy Roddick.
Yes, someone said it in chat.
I was thinking of Andy Roddick.
Thank you, YouTube chat.
I was thinking of Andy Roddick.
The best fans in the world.
There we go. So the NFL deadline literally just passed. It was 4 p.m. Eastern, and the 3 players really who were at the forefront of the headlines are Tony Pollard, Saquon Barkley, and Josh Jacobs, because these were the 3 running backs that were tagged in a running back market that has been very much fairly maligned for being basically exploitative. The franchise tag is $10.1 million fully guaranteed. And that is much lower than other positions because essentially there's like a calculation where you take some sort of percentage of the you come up with the mathematical formula, so where it's a yearly value that's, I think, towards the top of the market but not at the top of the market, and the market is known to be obviously very, very depressed right now because teams are preferring not to have workhorse running backs. They're preferring not to pay these guys. They just want to draft them, run them into the ground, and cast them aside. And Tony Pollard has signed the franchise tag. Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley did not. It was slightly surprising that Saquon didn't sign his extension before 4 p.m., but I'm not going to blame him. Saquon has been known to be team friendly, the kind of guy that wants to play, wants to be in the building. He's a team captain, although I think Josh Jacobs is too. But the point is that you shouldn't conflate those two because those guys deserve to be paid. Particularly, I would say Saquon, who, man, has he been through some tough years in New York and has been, I think, the face of the franchise. However, as a Giants fan, I would never have drafted a running back second overall to make them the face of the franchise because I think that that is outdated football roster construction. The game has evolved in the same way that you need all guys on the court in basketball to be able to shoot from three for the most part to be competitive, to be able to score at multiple levels on the floor. The same thing is to be said for not constructing your roster around one guy who is the most likely player on your team to get injured. The problem, though, is that because the positional differences in football are so acute, this formula for paying these guys is exploitative, just 100%. With Saquon and Josh Jacobs being these fantasy stars, Tony Pollard too, whatever, running backs in general, the fact that they're paid less than Hunter Renfrow, for example, or wide receiver threes on some teams, twos minimum, as they take beatings, it's wrong. Like the tight end market is actually still, it's an underrated, I think, storyline that the tight end market is a little bit depressed right now. But Evan Engram was able to reach an extension with the Jaguars, and he didn't have to play on the franchise tag. Former Giant Evan Engram. And at the very least, that market is sort of adjusting and moving in a certain direction. I mean, part of it is the fact that Kelsey needs to get paid. He's still the top tight end in the league, and he needs more money.
Yeah, he famously has like one of the more like for his stature of player, one of the more like team friendly deals in the league.
So does Patrick Mahomes.
And Mahomes himself, of course.
And in the midst of this, Chris Jones is looking for an extension. So
Right,
it complicates some
It's going to be a lot of money for
the
Chiefs to pony up at some point.
But the cap is exploding. Like as a
totally.
Giants fan, you have this is a players' rights situation, and the entire structure of the league should be different so that running backs should either not be subject to the standard rookie contract structure. They should be able to get out of their contracts after like year 3, for example, as something I heard on, I think, the Dan Patrick show, as a alternative where they can get out after year 3, no franchise tag, and the teams have to extend them while they're at the prime of their career. That's one way to adjust to it. The other way is for the league to have a more non-traditional model where players that are bringing in eyeballs on the fantasy side of things, fantasy football, which is a huge market, including daily fantasy with these sports books that the league is involved with, that they have a fund where they pay these guys for the eyeballs that they bring to their product, as opposed to them getting punished financially for doing the most that they can for their team. It is wrong. The free market doesn't solve all because it's all artificially constructed, particularly when it comes to this tag situation. Running backs should be treated better. Obviously, Tony Pollard, he felt probably more pressure to sign the tag because Ezekiel Elliott is still a free agent. I think they're going to bring him back maybe on a much cheaper deal. It doesn't seem like he wants to go elsewhere other than the Cowboys. That would be my guess. But that threat is still looming, or at the very least, the Cowboys front office was holding that over Tony Pollard's head. For Saquon on Josh Jacobs, and Jacobs has been open and said, I want to carry the torch, essentially. I want to take a stand for the rest of my position. And Saquon Barkley, it seems like he's kind of drawn a line in the sand, which I totally understand. The problem, though, is that those two guys aren't going to be able to do it alone. There needs to be systemic change from the union and the league. This is an emergency on behalf of the position. These guys shouldn't be putting their bodies through the ringer for very little money compared to the rest of their peers. And I'll also say this. What Saquon and Josh Jacobs are trying to do is not for them in the same way. Like Saquon Barkley, look, he's done Campbell's Soup and he's in New York. He's got some endorsement deals. He'll be okay. But the median NFL salary is like $800,000, maybe a little bit above that. The average career length for an NFL player is 3 to 4 years. For running backs, man, you could blow your knee out and you could be gone. And what they're trying to do is, as the stars, push the conversation about the position and the labor politics behind it to the forefront of people's minds. And yeah, they're trying to get theirs. But I also think Josh Jacobs has been clear that this is not just about him. And so, I mean, I just feel for the running backs because they're being cast aside and thrown aside by a league that benefits immensely from their production. I say this every time this topic comes up. Fantasy football brings in people who would not normally watch football. Like, I have friends who are not football fans, but they're in an office league, they're in a college league, and they'll tune in because they want to see the name of their guy, even if they don't know any other player's name on the team. The name of their guy go into the end zone for a touchdown. And those are running backs. Protect the game and protect the running backs. That's the bottom line here. So again, from a fan perspective, I did not want the Giants to take Saquon Barkley second overall. I wanted them to take Josh Allen. I mean, I was told that I was an idiot for that take. Look, yeah. Look where we're at right now, by the way. We took Daniel Jones the next year. I would have rather had Josh Allen, certainly, right? But this isn't just about how I'm right.
You can take that one to the bank forever, I think.
I mean,
That's a blank check.
Oh, totally. But a lot of smart fans didn't want to take a running back second overall because Gettleman's an idiot.
Yeah.
And, that's a horrible use of draft capital, and also because of the politics of the position and the situation. Once you draft a running back to be your workhorse, there is this internal pressure because of the draft status to get the guy the ball, get the guy the ball, get the guy the ball. That hurts his body. It's way too much to put on somebody. And it hurts the team. So I didn't love that, right? Of course. At the time. But does that mean that I think that there isn't a dire situation at the running back position? Yes, because there are not enough incentives put in place by the league for general managers to actually pay these guys in a way that is accurately reflective of their sacrifice for the team. So, these are labor issues. These are labor politics. And again, the running back coming out of college that plays 3 years and makes $800K, that's money that he's trying to invest in for the future, for the rest of his life. Because he's been trained since he was 5 years old that this is your dream. This is your skill set. Well, you'll go to college because you have to, because you can't get paid for your services right out of high school because we've decided that every player that comes into the NFL has to play 3 years for free for universities that don't pay them, that don't have interest in educating them, that treat them as semi-professionals and exploit the hell out of them as they pay their head coaches $10, $12 million a year, whatever the hell it is. That is fundamentally wrong. And so once they get into the NFL, these billionaires have to pony up because these guys are providing immense value to the franchise and to the sport as a whole.
Yeah, and also like to your point on that, it's not at this point anymore. Um, it's not entirely even the standard across sports anymore. I mean, hockey players, baseball players, but even basketball players, especially now with a little bit of the carve out with going to like G League Ignite or going to play overseas, like they don't have to necessarily work completely for free or almost work at a loss by going to college.
Yeah.
They don't have to do that. Like football players are now almost in a unique circumstance where their labor is sort of taken from them, extracted from them for 3 years before they can make anything off of it, even with name image.
And can I just say, when your labor is extracted, this is not like somebody whose labor is extracted working with their mind. This is someone whose labor is extracted with their
unpaid
physical,
internship on a computer.
and it's diminishing returns as they get hit and hit and hit
Right,
and age
absolutely.
more. So
and
that's why they have to cash in a small window.
Of course, and then and they have to cash in a small window, especially if you're a running back. And as you said, the average career length is like 4 or 5 years. You've retired from the thing, as you've said, that you've trained your whole life or most of your life to do before maybe you're 30.
Yeah.
And then you have the rest of your life. And I think ostensibly these teams and these organizations have a responsibility to these people. And I see I see what you're saying, Emma, about the Saquon situation from you as a football observer but also as obviously a class conscious and labor conscious person, and also as a Giants fan, the tension there that like Saquon is kind of being given a raw deal by virtue of like at the time front office mismanagement, poor draft pick allocation, poor roster schematics.
It was too much for him.
And
yeah.
Now, as a result of that, as well as kind of how inequitable the pay structure is for the franchise tag specifically for running backs, he's getting screwed over. He didn't ask to be taken second overall. He of course, I'm sure for his financial security, of course, every player wants to be taken as high as they can for that very reason.
Right.
But that wasn't his choice. And now basically, by virtue of where he was picked, what position he plays, and where the league and the game has gone, him and other people like Tony Pollard, like Josh Jacobs, like Austin Eckler are getting fucked over. Because they don't have the same positional value as other players per the way that the game and the league are trending, and there's nothing to adjust for that. It's slightly analogous to what the actors and writers are facing right now, where it's like the system and the league have changed, but there has been no accommodation for the people actually working to reflect those changes.
Yeah, well said. And I mean, and you can just see how they put dollars and cents on different kinds of players based on how they've structured the rules. Like,
totally.
Daniel Jones is not in a vacuum a 4 times the football player that Saquon Barkley is. Like, Daniel Jones is not top 5 at his position. Saquon probably is, right?
And even for example, Josh Jacobs led the league in all-purpose yards, basically.
Totally.
And he's less valuable than like Jimmy Garoppolo,
Dalvin
for
Cook
example.
isn't on the team. He had 1,200 yards last year.
He was like one of the best running backs. And also, as you're saying, when it comes to fantasy value too, and how much money goes into fantasy and goes into sports betting, the NFL generates a significant amount of revenue and amount of attention by having people have a personal investment in specific players via fantasy and via betting, and those players aren't getting anything from it.
No, and so the point though is that the quarterback, though, the rules are structured for the quarterback right now. That is why a team feels comfortable giving Daniel Jones $40 million and Saquon Barkley only 10, and not to sign him long term and to potentially let him walk into free agency next year. That's what happens. They could tag him a second time, and then it's like a much bigger bump, but they probably won't do that just because of that bump. And I do, and so the point is, like, the quarterbacks are protected by these rules about hitting the quarterback and all that stuff, and so that's why they're getting all the money. And I feel conflicted. I wanted Saquon to get the extension. I did. And I think that Joe Shane has now shown a propensity to be pretty a pretty big hardliner and the negotiations with DJ went up to the 4 p.m. deadline at the time of the free agency window a few months ago, and these negotiations clearly went up to the deadline as well. And reportedly, Saquon wanted 16. Giants were at around 13. I would have felt comfortable with 13. But at the same time, the cap is about to explode. Like, these guys deserve more money. I don't know. I'm getting way too in the weeds of like the Giants cap situation, but they deserve more money. It's not right. And it's a really scary thing for a guy to be going into a year where he's expected to run and get hit and play with reckless abandon, to know that he could not have he could lose millions and millions and millions of dollars for his family. Saquon has a daughter, with one hit, just right there. And how can you play? How can you play on a 1-year deal when you have no guarantees next year, that position in particular, without feeling any sense of hesitation? How can you give your full self? That's the human element behind this.
And it's like, there are very few jobs and very few sports where like that ultimately is the calculation, right? Where it's like, not only like, do I want to do this? Do I, like, there are always talks when the draft comes around, or certain players have a situation like, certain players have a situation where it's like, do they love the game enough? Like, are they obsessed with basketball? Is it the only thing or football? Is it the only thing that they want to do? I mean, what comes with that also, there's never a consideration of, does he want to put himself in a position for potentially maybe not what he's actually worth relative to every other factor in the National Football League, to potentially like get serious lasting physical trauma before the rest of his life plays out? Yeah. Like, I understand if people aren't obsessed with football enough to go through that. I understand people like Andrew Luck who wanted to retire because of that, or Chris Borland, a defensive player on the 49ers, who retired prematurely. Those guys would have still had great careers. They were great players in their own right, but they thought their life was more important. And they made that choice. And so the players that do make that choice to risk their livelihoods, or I should say their health, for this sport that they love and that a lot of people love, they should be paid commensurate to that. That's it. So that's our not so short rant about the running back market at the franchise tag deadline. Now let's just talk about the signing from I guess it was some days ago, right? When did D-Hop get signed? I think it was yesterday. Really? God. I think it was literally yesterday. Wow. My sense of time is completely warped. But the Titans have signed DeAndre Hopkins to a 2-year deal that seems pretty damn low. 2-year deal with, according to Rappaport, $12 million in the first season, up to $3 million in incentives. And this is a guy who's 31 years old, who missed the first 6 games of last year because of a suspension for cheating with performance-enhancing drugs. To be honest with you, I don't really have a ton of sympathy for when that happens. I don't like cheating, and that's all I'll say about it, because I support the players in basically every other situation. But this is also a part of the whole that you hear about DeAndre Hopkins, that he doesn't like to practice, and he's not the hardest like grinder. And I don't love the idea that he tried to take a shortcut by taking performance-enhancing drugs. I don't know, dude. You're like one of the top paid receiver. He was one of the top paid receivers in football. Maybe just like show up for your teammates. But that's probably why his salary is a little bit lower than expected for the Tennessee Titans. And it's not like he's taking a cheap deal to play for the Chiefs or the Bills or the Bengals or something, or the 49ers, teams that are supposedly, or the Eagles, like in the Super Bowl window, right? He's going to a team that is not in the best shape, but they're just desperate. So that's what's shocking to me, is that this number is so low. I guess it's not shocking given what I just said, what his reputation is around the NFL, frankly. It's a weird deal.
And the fact that the Titans did it, and then like
it makes me it makes me very curious about what the calculations of other contending teams and even teams that aren't like, capital C contenders, like not just like the Chiefs and the Bills and the teams of that nature, but I mean like why the Lions didn't get this done, why the Panthers didn't get this done. Like, I'm just curious. Like, the Titans have an aging Ryan Tannehill and the rookie Will Levis as their quarterback options. Besides Peter Skoronski, who again is a rookie, will be a rookie, have probably the worst offensive line in the league. And other than now DeAndre Hopkins, also maybe the worst group of pass catchers in the entire league.
100. I mean, that's why they were desperate to do this.
Right. I mean,
even though this deal is pretty cheap. It's pretty cheap for what you would expect DeAndre Hopkins to get, but if the Titans honestly were a little bit more honest about where they are as a football team, I don't think they would have done this deal. And that's why I'm just a little surprised too, because I thought the era of bad deals was kind of over once John Robinson left and Rand Cawthorn came in as the general manager. Part of the reason they're in this goddamn situation is because John Robinson made a series of horrific decisions as GM, including trading A.J. Brown away for nothing.
Which I think essentially, like, basically got him fired.
As
it should have, given what happened to the Eagles after they traded for A.J. Brown.
A.J. Brown, they hadn't had a receiver get 1,200 yards since Drew Bennett in 2004. A.J. Brown gets it, and then they trade him away for one first-round pick to the Eagles, who then go to the Super Bowl with him. And they pick
Traylon Burks, who is like a real, like almost like diet version of A.J. Brown.
And,
who, of course, he's very young.
He becomes A.J.
Exactly.
Brown,
That's
you
the hope.
had
Right.
A.J. Brown. And it seemed like a cheap move from the team, or like just a way too galaxy brain move by John Robinson. Then he also, I mean, like let us not forget, they signed Julio Jones, and that was the biggest disaster ever.
It just did not work.
Traded
it just
for
totally
him.
Flopped.
They traded a second-round pick to the Atlanta Falcons, which was like the Falcons clearly won that trade. He was, one of the greatest receivers in the history of football, Julio Jones. Let's get it straight here. I mean, Julio Jones is a legend. One of the only football players I've seen in the wild. I saw him in person in Las Vegas when I was there for work at TYT. And when you see someone like an athlete like that in person, just standing in street clothes, you realize, they are just like totally built different than the rest of us. But that's a bit beside the point. I'm a huge Julio Jones fan. It was sad that he couldn't perform at that point, but those were some terrible moves. And this doesn't make the Titans a contender. It maybe means they're more competitive in the division that is fairly wide open, because the Jaguars are clearly on the upswing, but like they also have a PED suspension on their offensive line, and who knows where what the state of their line is, and I think that they're the favorites to win the division, but anything can happen. It just seems like a move from a team that doesn't know which direction to go, whether to move on and restart, or whether to go further all in. And I feel like they should probably err on the side of restarting.
Hopkins' game lends itself, even as he's getting it to the other side of 30, which is like always kind of a warning sign for wide receivers in the NFL. His game sort of lends itself to a more durable wide receiver as they age, in the sense that he's not like a burner. He's not an over the middle guy who always will get smoked by linebackers or things like that. He's kind of a finesse guy and a deep threat guy. I think he's still going to be excellent as a individual player, but
he can route run, yeah.
But at the same time, this is not enough to paper over all of the shortcomings and all of the gaps that the Titans are going to need to fill on this team, despite what I think will still be a very good defense and a very well-coached team, because Mike Vrabel doesn't really coach down anybody.
No.
So still, with all that being said, I do genuinely think there is a universe where this is one of the worst teams in the league, even with Hopkins, honestly.
100%.
I don't think Hopkins is enough to cover for how bad that offensive line is going to be. Skoronski's a great player, but he's never played an NFL game before, and he's going to be learning to adjust to NFL game speed and the ins and outs of an NFL schedule. The other wide receivers are Traylon Burks, who's a second-year guy who is not fully developed yet. I still think there's a lot of room for him to grow or to actually figure out how to play the position. And then like Nick Westbrook-Akine and do I know a third one? Do I have a third one?
I don't know.
Khalif Raymond, is he still on the Titans?
You'll need to tell me, because I know that DeAndre Hopkins, he missed 6 games for PEDs.
No, he's on the line. He's on the lines. He's actually
okay.
not. He's not even on the Titans.
He missed 6 games for PEDs and 2 for like another injury towards the end of the year when the Cardinals were horrible and he was probably just sitting out. And he still had more receiving yards than any receiver on the Titans. So like
that is insane.
They desperately need they need the receiving room to not be as horrific as it is. So now I guess it's just the Texans who have the worst receiving room in football at this point, but
so
Titans were definitely at the bottom before this.
And so that's why I find it so baffling that the numbers out of it seem to be way lower than I anticipated. The teams who seem to be interested were, I guess, not nearly as interested as they thought they were. And for someone who obviously, as we just said about his age, is on the other side of 30, hasn't really been able to have the luxury of like playing on a playoff contender, I would sort of think that that's what would have been sort of the prime motivator in terms of where he'd go next, and to end up on the Titans, a team that like for both me and you, and I think a lot of people like observing them, like seems to be a real head scratcher in terms of like what they're actually trying to do over there.
Well, he was also, it was apparently a bidding war with the Patriots, another team that is in a bit of limbo, I would say.
Totally.
But like, so he clearly didn't care about winning a Super Bowl. He wants the money.
But
these numbers are very low, so that's what's odd.
I think if it was only about potential playoff success or getting to as close as you can to a Super Bowl, he wouldn't have even been considering the Patriots or the Titans.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we'll maybe learn a little bit more as this continues to play out, but it's just interesting, and I guess we'll see what happens. I mean, Julio was literally what I thought of immediately, because I was like, this spending capital, or even whether it's via trade capital or just money on a aging, Pro Bowl All-Pro receiver has not worked for them in the past. So I guess we'll see if it works again.
Lest we forget the Randy Moss signing. He was there for like at the very, very end of his career. I don't even think he played a snap for them.
So actually, for the third time, then.
Yes.
Randy, Julio,
yes,
and D-Hop. That's nuts.
Yeah, totally nuts.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yes, exactly. One more NFL story here that I wanted to make sure we touched on, because there is something brewing right now with Jon Gruden and his lawsuit against the NFL. In a few days, I think it's 2 or 3 days, the NFL owners are having their second meeting of the offseason, where they will vote on the sale of the Commanders from Dan Snyder to Josh Harris's group, and it's expected to be around $6 billion. And I'm sure Commanders fans are rejoicing. You are now somewhat connected to the Commanders because of Josh Harris. He's a Devil. He's the owner of the Devils.
That's right.
This is a part of like his, I don't know, his takeover of multiple sports. And there have been rumblings that they're kind of trying to force this along because Josh Harris doesn't necessarily have the money himself that they would have expected or mandated from other other past applicants for team ownership, because he's having to cobble together a group or maybe some extra funds and billions, whatever. I mean, he's a billionaire asshole, what can we say? But they want the ultimate billionaire asshole, Dan Snyder, to be out.
Of course.
And why this is relevant to Gruden is that Jon Gruden, when this entire investigation into Dan Snyder's conduct as an owner was ongoing, or the finding had been essentially it had been reached but buried. This was an internal investigation done by the NFL, and they just never really showed the public what was in that investigation. Around that time, emails that were racist by Jon Gruden, homophobic, sexist were leaked to the press. And according to Al Davis, the owner of the Raiders, the team had sat on these emails for months and knew for months and didn't tell the owner of the team, which means that there was some strategic reason that the emails, as a part of this, the hundreds of thousands collected in an investigation of Dan Snyder, that just the ones about Jon Gruden were leaked. And why is that the case? One, Jon Gruden has not gotten along with Roger Goodell, apparently, for his entire time in the league. They've butted heads. Dan Snyder and Jon Gruden also, I think, had this massive falling out and didn't get along. Dan Snyder wanted him out as well. But, like, Dan Snyder testified under oath to Congress that he did not release the emails. So, and Gruden has, I think, through his lawyer, said that they basically believe that the NFL did it. So, like, there are just a ton of questions here. And Gruden is not somebody who I'm going to cry tears over because the emails that he sent were horrific, including racist tropes about the NFLPA director, DeMaurice Smith, who, per this ESPN article that I'm referencing pretty heavily, said... some source told ESPN that Smith privately said, yeah, I helped leak that email. So we don't know, or I was a part of that. But another possibility of who leaked this is that it could have been Dan Snyder himself, who knew that Gruden and Goodell were enemies, and Snyder was trying desperately to hold on to the Washington franchise, and did so as like a way to say, here, I'll stab your enemy if you let me hold on to this team. And regardless, I think Gruden is very angry about the situation, obviously, because apparently the email trove has a ton of damning information about some of the people like Roger Goodell and the league offices and the league lawyers who knew about potentially some of this stuff. Allegedly, who knows, and didn't reveal it to the public, and were sitting on their own information. Other just conduct that never saw the light of day, including that about Dan Snyder, who was the subject of the investigation. Gruden is basically mad that only his racism and misogyny and homophobia went out to the public and was done so in a targeted way. I'm not sympathetic to the racism and the homophobia and the misogyny, but I do want to know what was in that investigation. And it seems like the league office, for some reason, or whoever, selectively leaked these emails, but they held on to the findings in the report about Dan Snyder's conduct to force him to sell the team.
Absolutely. It was like a shakedown.
Shakedown,
it was
right.
Not of course, as you're also saying, like, you know, we're not like caping for Dan Snyder or Jon Gruden here. It's more like it's shitty assholes fucking over shitty assholes, and so they don't have to leak more damning information about said both parties
all right,
of the
we're
shitty
gonna get
assholes.
Demonetized.
Sorry. Shitty assholes.
Yeah, we got it. But yeah, so it's not about that, but it's just about why the NFL is hiding the bigger story.
And
here.
what
is the
specifically
story?
are they hiding?
And so what we are potentially going to find out in the midst of this lawsuit, if, you know, there's anything in writing about who leaked this, is that we could see what the motivation is and who it's meant to target and who it's meant to protect. Because through discovery, they're going to be able to see people's email addresses. And this was initially leaked to the Wall Street Journal, then the New York Times. Gruden obviously has an interest in this. I think Al Davis does Mark Davis. Yeah. Because he felt pissed off that he was basically publicly embarrassed and that the league knew about the racism and the horrible stuff that Gruden had said, and that they just like didn't give him a heads up essentially, and it came out through the press, and then he had to scramble to fire Jon Gruden. So I understand that side of things. But yeah, it seems like there could be some sort of larger cover up to protect people high up in the league office that were named in this report but only Gruden was for some reason the person that felt the ramifications. I mean, even Dan Snyder, he's making billions. He's selling the Commanders for $6 billion. He's making off like a bandit. The one thing that could be problematic for him is if the Democrats retake the House and they keep going back into this investigation, which they had started before the Republicans took it back, there could be more there now that Gruden is bringing all this back up. But also, Dan Snyder told the Congress under oath that he did not leak this. Was he lying? Because if he was lying, he could be charged with lying under oath.
Yeah, I think that's definitely within the realm of possibility. But I think the reason I certainly think that it's possible that I think maybe the potentially most obvious reasoning for why only really Gruden came out with any sort of repercussions for what came from those emails is that whoever leaked it, and I think it's pretty, I mean, I think I would have my guesses, obviously, as to who leaked it or who at least knew about it being leaked. Whether they actually did the leaking or not, is that I think they were sort of like, this thing with Gruden is very clearly like black and white wrong, right? Like, this is very de facto, like, clear racism in the clearest forms of it in terms of like actually expressing it over email, talking about somebody's features in a way that is racist, talking about a black person, the head of the players union's features. Let's flood the zone with that to kind of use as a diversion against what people either A might come out as a result, or B, so that people might not be like, hey, where's the rest of those emails?
Mm-hmm.
Where's the written report I thought we were getting from that investigation? It really, as you were saying, it's to say nothing of the actual substance of what Gruden said in those emails, but I think it for sure, almost especially now that Gruden is refusing to settle in this regard, I think it's definitely was and is a smokescreen.
Just asking questions, baby.
That's all.
That's all. We'll read some IMs here. Wu-Tang Forever. As a Mariners fan, I share your disappointment in how baseball is going this season. Truly the worst time of year for sports fans. It really is the desert. So we're going to go a little short today.
Yeah, the Mets are also... The Mets had a gutsy extra inning win last night, but that was after they had two extremely embarrassing losses.
I mean, the
Dodgers.
Yankees blow, too.
Yeah, Yankees are not playing well. They lost in a pretty poor fashion.
I think they're in last right now, if I'm not mistaken.
It's been tough sledding for them since Judge got injured.
I guess the Red Sox.
They're tied.
They're tied for last in the AL East. Wow, that really is an unbelievable sight.
But as I was saying, what is wild with this division is they're 6 games over 500, both the Red Sox and the Yankees, and they're in last.
Yeah, damn. God, the Rays are just—they're
so good,
so good,
juggernaut.
Good for them.
If the Yankees, I said this last time that we were talking about the standings, but if the Yankees and the Red Sox were in the AL Central, they would be in first place.
That's unreal.
The Twins are 2 games over 500 in first place, and the Yankees and Red Sox are 6 games over 500 and they're last, tied for last. Whereas the Rays are 24 games over 500.
Left field is best said the Rays starting rotation is injury riddled. How low have their World Series chances dropped? I would have have to know more. Bradley can answer.
I don't think so. They're being this far ahead in the standings as well as having this much of a cushion. I don't think I think there's still so much left in the season that's not. I don't see that as being a complete roadblock to them when getting to the World Series. Now in July, as I sit here in July.
Right. Dylan from Australia. I know nothing about sports generally speaking, but I dig your show. Thank you. If you guys are watching, please like the stream. That would be lovely. Now from Trinidad, Emma and Bradley, please check the Majority Report email for ESVN. Email from, I won't say your email, but a hotmail.com address.
Sure.
Okay, we'll check it out. Orioles baby said Rays are skidding. All about the O's.
Yeah.
Hey. Good for the
Orioles.
Really
well too. They're up 20. They're 22 games over 500.
Yeah.
They're playing really well.
Tom Lofink, happy Monday. The rugby championship, the Southern Hemisphere equivalent of the men's Six Nations, is underway, and the men's rugby World Cup starts on the 8th of September. Can I call in to talk about it? Also, we're probably not taking calls today. I know I said we would earlier.
Well, we got a little derailed.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. We got derailed with this air condining fixing situation.
If we had started on time, I think we totally would.
Yeah.
But we can next week if that's of interest to you, Emma.
Yeah. Also, Emma, I should clarify that when I asked you in my majority report, I am last week, if Tim Pool talked about sports, I meant in the same sense of Tim offering. Yeah, but sorry if I accidentally insulted you. You did not, Tom. Don't you worry. No insult. Shaoist, Emma, I think you're right on with your stance on trans women in sports. The people whining about integrity are full of shit, and I just want to use it as a wedge issue to attack the trans community in general. These same people nonstop punch down and make fun of the WNBA, so they have no credibility when it comes to the integrity of women's sports. Megan Rapinoe summed it up well in some recent comments she made about the topic. She's been great about the topic. She's a great example of like a cis female woman who isn't a total piece of crap talking about this topic. She also signed a letter to the White House about their weighing in on the sports stuff, which I thought was very well said. So I can never say her last name accurately, but Megan Rapinoe.
I think it's Rapinoe. I'm pretty sure Rapinoe.
Yeah, Rapinoe sounds wrong.
Yeah. Just functionally.
Right.
Aesthetically.
Yes. So I think she's been dead on. Blue Cheese Bandit says, have you ever considered covering the unfair labor practices at the UFC? Would love to hear you discuss that, especially the conditions surrounding Francis Ngannou's exit as he pushed for a fighters union. You know what? I will look that up.
Yes, and also that's something definitely that would be something great to call in about.
Yes.
If and when we do calls next week.
We will do calls next week. Yes.
That would be a great thing to call in about, and a few other baseball fans call in just to give us a primer because we're not as clued into that. And any soccer fans with the Women's World Cup coming up on Thursday, we'd love to hear some of your thoughts. For calling in on for next Monday. And I think once that starts, we can totally discuss that a little bit further once we get a little bit more game action as it starts on Thursday in Australia and New Zealand.
Airbud says, bark, 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 wolf, wolf, bits NFL owners, bark, bark. I don't get it. Bites NFL owners, maybe? Airbud's biting NFL owners.
There's a chance it's referencing something that I actually don't have. I don't believe I can explain in an economically sufficient fashion. I can tell you off air.
Okay, interesting. Sam's bald spot. Sam does not have a bald spot. That's the thing.
No, he's got pretty thick hair.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot believe it. Honestly, at his age, it's. I don't mean to. Or Sam's ball spot. When is ESPN going to make its Rumble debut? I don't know. Good point. TIRJ from Mexico says, Emma, can you acknowledge Bradley's buffness?
This is Jason from This Is Revolution.
Jason.
Thank you, sir.
Well, you just did, so I don't have to, Jason.
That's so hard. Right
yeah. Go off, King. All right. I think that's pretty much does it for today. Kind of an efficient ESVN, baby, but we will take calls next week. I promise you guys. I'm so sorry about that. Again, air conditioning saga, hopefully nearing an end. But please like the stream, rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff. Subscribe. We're so close.
9.75 thousand. We're getting very, very close.
Without us making basically any effort to make that bigger, except for doing the stream.
I will self-immolate if we get to 10,000.
Okay.
I'll set myself on fire.
Everybody who wants Bradley dead, please subscribe to ESVN.
I will light myself on fire.
All right. We will see you next week.